In today's weather, the remains of Hurricane Oscar heading out into the Atlantic. The National Hurricane Center no longer detecting any tropical activity in the Atlantic basin. But look down there in the lower left corner. You can see Hurricane Kristy, which intensified rapidly to Category 4 this afternoon. In the next several hours, we are expecting that to become our next Category 5 storm. Here's a quick look at the Pacific Basin showing Hurricane Kristy right there. You can see that there's no land masses to be concerned with. This is just going to continue moving west-northwest over the next few days and gradually encounter that subtropical high with the cooler, drier air and the cold currents, and that will allow that storm to gradually dissipate by Monday and Tuesday. There's a quick look at the visible satellite imagery, and the eye very well defined, and it's got that washing machine action going on there in the center. Let's take a look at that on the infrared imagery. This is a lot more useful for tracking the strength of the storm. We can kind of assess the structure and look at trends over time. And we definitely see an annular structure here with cooling of those cloud tops reflecting some strengthening over the past several hours. And the Dvorak imagery, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that is a classic high-end T-number structure showing what we typically see with Category 4 and Category 5 storms. We're getting into those colder shades of white and gray, and they form a continuous circular structure around the eye. The Dvorak technique is a little bit complex. We're not going to go into that here. However, if you Google around, you can certainly find some presentations on how that's done. And I had to check around to see if there's any reconnaissance missions. That would be a very long flight, so it's pretty doubtful. Yeah, just scrolling through here, some investigations of Oscar, and I guess we're just mostly going off satellite for Kristy. Anyway, that is expected to be Category 5 later this evening, so check out the National Hurricane Center page for the latest information. Taking a look at the United States, well, we've got another large western U.S. system. You can see the temperature contrast between Oregon and Nevada. 70s, which is well above average for this time of year around Winnemucca, Elko, Ely, and rather cool air up to the north, and it is a unstable atmosphere up there. There's cumuliform clouds, showers, and you can see the structure in the thickness field right there, the 540 decameter, 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness, forming a cold pool across the Willamette Valley and Seattle. And that represents an upper level trough or a cutoff low. Technically, well, since that's north of the polar front jet, that's actually going to be an occlusion, not necessarily a cutoff low. However, we could be in a split flow pattern. Yeah, we are right there, a northern branch across Canada and a southern branch coming in across the U.S. So let's look at it and not just talk about it. This is the 250 millibar chart, about 34,000 feet. And we do see a very complex pattern across the western states. There's the northern branch. Here's the southern branch, and we've even got some branches off to the south. That is a bona fide cutoff low out in the Pacific. And the southern ridge right there, that's probably going to be associated with the subtropical jet. There's our trough right there in the western states. Let's check out the 500 millibar chart. Here we can see the dynamics at work across the U.S. There's our strong trough across Oregon, maybe a vortex across Bend, Oregon, and some cold temperatures down below minus 20 Celsius at 500 millibars. You can see the tight packing of the height field right there, indicating the position of the polar front jet. So it's running about like that, and there's the polar front jet max. Down to the south, the flow a lot weaker, but in the Great Lakes area, a large trough extending from Ontario down into Indiana. Out ahead of that, upward vertical motion, helping to produce clouds and a few showers across the Great Lakes area. There's the satellite imagery this afternoon. Little Texas two-step there, the frame's jumping. But you can see that very strong frontal zone. That's divided into a couple different areas. One, this area of cold air advection flowing across the Great Lakes area, indicated by open cell cumulus and the development of lake effect showers. Out ahead of it, a baroclinic cloud shield associated with the warm conveyor belt. Let's take a look at that on the surface chart. Not quite as prominent because a lot of the processes that are going on are in the middle and upper levels. The surface chart basically just showing a somewhat weakly defined frontal zone right through there, dropping off into the 50s up to the north, 70s out ahead of it. Very warm day in the northeastern U.S. Looking at 74 at Burlington, Vermont, 75 at Albany, and 67 with JFK Airport picking up a little bit of flow off of the Atlantic. Here's a look at that cold advection cumulus and stratocumulus. If we freeze it right there, you can see across Michigan, they're getting the brunt of that broken and overcast cloud. That's due to the flow moving across Lake Michigan, picking up moisture, increasing instability, and we end up with a large cloud mass across the northern part of Michigan there. And there's how it looks from below the Mackinac Straits Bridge up there in northern Michigan. There's the cold advection stratocumulus and cumulus. You can see two distinct layers. One is the convective cloud, and the other is the stratiform where it's spreading out. A very quiet evening across the southeastern U.S. Warm weather continuing with highs in the 80s. Flooding problems continue in northern Florida. Many of the rivers swollen due to high tides and heavy rains from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. And checking out the weather in the southern plains, summer continuing to hang around like an unwelcome house guest. Highs in the low 90s across much of Texas and southern Oklahoma. Cooler weather up to the north in Kansas, seeing upper 60s and 70s. But down to the south, this is more of a dry summer weather pattern with cumuliform clouds and maybe a little bit of stratiform cloud across the Ozarks. And since this is somewhat of a warm season pattern, let's take a look at the forecast soundings. I'm going to switch over to the Theta E product to see if we have any moisture making its way north, and there is a little bit of that. So let me go ahead and drop a sounding across Oklahoma City. We do see that there is a little bit of moisture in the lower levels, low 60s dew points up to about 6,000 feet. A little bit of Cape, 1,500 to 2,200. However, a lot of warm air in the mid-levels. And you can see that that lifted parcel is constructed with a 91 to 92 degree temperature, which is probably not representative of the column. So I would probably bias this down towards the lower values, maybe close to 1,500 for that mixed layer method. And the model's not really breaking out anything, maybe a little bit of high-based convection up there around Guthrie and what's that town in the middle? Stroud. And a little bit of convection further east around Conway and Little Rock, but also that is very iffy as far as if that's going to get going. And if we take a close-up look at the satellite imagery, you can see it percolating there late in the afternoon and early evening, but at this time not really doing very much. In the Great Plains, fair across much of the region, highs in Minnesota and Wisconsin in the 40s and 50s. But the next Pacific system coming in from the west, you can see the outline of the upper level ridge. A general rule of thumb is that the downstream portion, the downstream edge of that cirriform cloud, that roughly corresponds to where the ridge axis is. And sure enough, there it is on the 500 millibar chart, the ridge axis right there. Across the southwestern U.S., clear, and we do have some very warm air starting to set up once again in Arizona. Current temperatures back up to 97 at both Phoenix and Tucson, 95 in the California deserts. But up to the north, we get into that frontal zone, which is located roughly around Reno, San Francisco, and it gets much colder as you get up into the Mount Shasta area. And we do have freeze warnings for tonight in Northern California, north of Ukiah in northern Mendocino County, frost advisories in the inland valleys around Eureka, and another freeze warning in the Mount Shasta area, including Weed and Wairika, 26 to 32 degrees tonight with that very strong cold advection. Freeze problems in the northwest as well, especially around Medford. They've got freeze warnings there. Grants Pass, the rural valleys, down to 26 degrees. Frost advisories in northwestern Oregon, including all of Salem, Eugene, Beaverton, and Hillsboro. Temperatures down to 33 there tonight. And a freeze watch in northern Oregon from the Dalles into Pendleton, and for Yakima could be down to 29 tonight. However, for now, we've got this large classic baroclinic cloud field. If we look at the water vapor imagery, well, this certainly looks familiar for many forecasters, starting to develop a comma head right there. And this is that so-called vorticity comma cloud. You're getting a look at that and that area of vortex formation right there near that inflection point. And wouldn't you know it, that's right in that zone where we have the very tight thickness packing. That is the frontogenesis zone in southeastern Oregon. Let's head up north into Alaska. We've got a high wind watch for Friday night on Prince of Wales Island, looking for gusts up to 60 miles an hour there. Most of our problems in Alaska are actually along the North Slope in the Brooks Range. We've got a winter storm warning, which should be expiring right now, around the Dalton Highway, looking for 3 to 6 inches of snow there, and winter weather advisories east of Prudhoe Bay in that zone right there near Kaktovik. We have gale warnings throughout the Gulf of Alaska, very common for this time of year. The Bering Sea, the Chukchi Sea, winds could be up to 40 knots and seas 13 to 17 feet. In Canada, a storm surge warning for the north coast of Yukon. I believe that coast is completely uninhabited. Maybe you all can research that and comment, but I don't think anybody lives on that north slope. I think some of the native tribes go there to hunt, so maybe that's mostly for them. Snow squall watch for the Tuktoyaktuk area. Brief heavy snows, restricted visibilities tonight and Thursday morning. And the rest of the problems in Canada focus on the Maritimes right in here. Strong frontal system approaching. They do have wind warnings for the Anthony area, winds to 70 miles an hour through this evening. Advisories posted across southern Newfoundland into eastern Nova Scotia Thursday night through Saturday. Rains up to 3 inches and winds gusting to 50 miles an hour. Some of the roads could see erosion and ferry services could be impacted. And this is where we take a look at the forecast, the GFS, and my own frontal analysis. Those are my own markings. There's no models that do that. So anytime you see that, that's done somewhere by a human forecaster. So we can see that frontogenesis zone there in southeastern Oregon, a mix of rain and snow. Heading into tonight, we see that frontal system move into the Salt Lake City area, into western Wyoming, and then by morning, heading into the central Rockies, bringing the bands of precip with that, with clearing in its wake. And with that rapid clearing, cold advection, that's going to drive the temperatures down, and that's the reason we have those freeze warnings in effect in that area. Much colder in the northeastern U.S., highs in the 50s with 60s on the coast. The south-central U.S. continues to broil in those 90-degree temperatures. The Midwest looking for a marginal risk of severe thunderstorms in Iowa and northern Missouri ahead of this warm front. The main concern is hail during the evening, and we could see a few weak supercells given the moderate instability and marginal shear. In the north-central U.S., much colder. Another blob of cold air working south, so lows tomorrow night will range from about 39 at Denver, down to 30 at Bismarck, and down to 19 at Yellowstone Park. So heading into the rest of Thursday, you can see that frontal system approach that area of concern. Thunderstorms going up around Des Moines, down to Bethany, and maybe down to Kansas City. Then we head into Friday. This frontal system continues marching eastward. The southern tail end of that front starts becoming stationary. So by evening, the weather pattern's looking like this. Rains pushing into the Great Lakes area. In the south-central U.S., cool air down into Oklahoma City, down to Lubbock and Amarillo, but just a very weak push of cold air. A warm nose lifts up the Ohio River Valley. Highs will reach the low 80s in that area. Non-severe thunderstorms expected, mostly in this region right here. And in the Pacific Northwest, a broad atmospheric river begins hitting the coast late Friday night. IVT values about 500 to 800. One large surge of 1,000 heading into Washington for early Saturday. So that will produce a lot of rain Friday night going into Saturday morning. So as we head into the rest of Saturday, cold air advection into New England. Once again, 90s continue in Texas. The southeastern U.S. looking mostly at 80s and miserable in the southwestern deserts. This is going to be one of the warmest days of this week. Phoenix expected to hit 100 degrees. They would come very close to the latest 100-degree record. That was set October 27th, 2016. This is October 26th. And in the Pacific Northwest, atmospheric river continues to affect that area. More rains on the way once again going into Sunday. Another system pushing into the Rockies and the southwestern U.S. More snows and rains once again in the Four Corners area for probably on Tuesday. And a stout area of warm advection and moisture heading north into the prairies. We go into midweek. Another frontal system marching eastward. So this is very much a Pacific weather pattern, and yet another frontal system moving into the northwestern U.S. for Halloween. And that brings us to the very end of the sequence. Right there, November 1st on Friday. Active out west, and some rather quiet weather in the eastern U.S. And just a reminder to head to YouTube comments and let us know how the weather is in your area and where you are. For example, KRTTD mentions the clear skies in northern Alabama last week, views of the aurora. Jan Curtis up there in Wyoming got a little bit of snow last week. And Christine Cortez also got snow out there in northeastern Arizona. So please comment on here and let me know what's going on in your part of the country. So anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday evening. And have a great Thursday, and we'll see you back here in just a couple days. Take care. Bye-bye.